today. Let me get this going. Frame rate, 5 frames per second. Everything should be pretty good. Lecture 5. Okay, so today what we're going to do is we're going to work on modification tools in Illustrator. Modification tools fall off the tool, so you can see them a little bit more clearly, are the ones that begin right underneath the pencil tool and they continue down just above the spray can. We have the rotation tool. Underneath the rotation tool is the reflect tool. We also have the scale tool. And underneath the scale tool, we have a couple of others. We have something called a shear tool. It's also called skew, depending on what program you're in. We have something called the reshape tool. And we have the free transform tool. These are principally the tools that are covered in this lesson. Everybody got this? And the final versions that we see here, this is really one of the strengths of working not just in Illustrator, but in computers, computer graphics in general, is that once you make one shape, you can always modify it in some way, change the size, reflect it, make minor changes or major changes in color. You can distort, you can do all sorts of things. And from that one original, you can make many copies. You can also make many variations in a very short amount of time. And that's what we're doing today. What they have done in the textbook is they have set up for us, they've designed the logo. They've given us the formats for the letterhead, envelope, and calling card, which are like the core of a business system. And what we're doing in here is we're taking these individual elements and we're moving them from one file to another. And some of them we're keeping them intact. Others we're modifying a little bit to make it look a little bit different. For example, you see here on the envelope the word stick. Well, that's still taken from the type that they use here in the logo, but just making a copy of it and pulling it over, changing the colors a little bit, and distorting it a little bit. And it looks all, I won't say totally different, it looks similar, but it clearly has a very different appearance. Changing its opacity, there are a handful of things that we can do for this. So here's the envelope. Then we start by creating the letterhead, so they give us all of the elements that we need for the logo, and we're going to create the little flowers over here. And there's some pretty nifty tools that allow us to do that. We also make calling cards. Where are the calling cards? Okay, maybe I didn't open. But here is an example of a calling card. They're all made from the same elements, fundamentally the same elements, and then modified, changed a little bit using most of these tools. There's a couple of others also.
Can you change your agent?
You have it on preview, and then the one down here. You want standard mode or full screen mode with menu bar? Oh, I see what you're saying. You have it's in preview.
Yeah.
Okay. Quit preview. Just Command Q. Quit. Did everybody understand the question? She's viewing the files. If you double click on the files from your CD, it oftentimes will open it in preview. Preview is a program that Apple offers that allows you to open files even if you don't have the application. So if you don't have Illustrator, So when we give you an Illustrator file, you can open it in preview. You can't modify it, you can't change it in any way, but you can at least see it. So that's oftentimes what it does. You double click on it and it opens it. Instead, if you open Illustrator first, and then you drag those files onto, or one of the files, multiple files, onto the icon of Illustrator in the dock below, down here, that will launch those files in Illustrator. Does that help? Sort of? Did it work? Okay. So let me hide some of these. I'll leave some of them open. Well, it will all be open, but I want to see what's going on here so we can get an idea of how to work this one. Let's try this one. Here it is. This is one. This is the calling card. So we'll work on that. So that's the last part of the file. This is the first part of the file. This is the second part. Here are all the parts. So let's set these aside and let's work on this one. In addition to the tools that I showed you in the tool palette, there's a little menu or palette that we can open that will really be helpful. If it's not over here, and I don't see it online, I can go to Window, and what I want to do is I want to select Transform. There's a little Transform.
How'd you do that again?
Go to Window, Transform. And if you can see the palettes and the toolbars and that sort of thing, tools that are visible are checked. The ones that are not visible are not checked. And if you want to view them, if you want them on the desktop, highlight them, release the mouse, and it will make them visible. So I want this one right here, Transform, because this can be very powerful. I probably showed, in fact, I know I showed you this the other day when I moved the rulers, the starting points of them. Well, what we can do with this is that if I want to move my little circle that I'm using for a logo here, and I want to move it in a really precise place, the best way on my page, the best way to do that is to use the Transform tool. Now, let's look at the Transform tool, and that will explain how this works. Let's first by looking at this little widget right here. See the one with the little 9 boxes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and the one that's in black is in the center. Okay. What that means is that if I wish to move, resize, rotate, or skew this object from here, so I can do that from here. I don't have to use these tools. For example, if I wish to move this, and I'm going to reset my rulers so that I have 0, 0 right here. Also, it might be helpful. Right now it's in points. I need to change. I would rather have it in inches. Just a preference. Anybody remember how to do that? Go to Illustrator, Preferences, and then I can select Units and Display Performance. General inches, that should be, I don't know why it's not doing that. Okay, let me go back again. Let's go back to File, Document Setup, and it might be better. Units and points, I don't want that. I'm going to switch to inches. That's why. So if you can't do it by going to Illustrator, Preferences, Units and Display Performance, which will allow me to select inches here, leave stroke and type in points. If that doesn't change my ruler settings here, then go to File, Document Setup, and where it has units, instead of inches, I'm selecting inches. So it has to be selected in a couple of different places.
Where did you get that one?
This one, you go to File, Document Set. And when you begin a new file, this is similar to this. A little panel comes up. But if you want to change it anytime, for example, if I want to change the orientation of my paper, change the paper size, all those sorts of things, I can do that. So now I see my rulers, and they're in inches, and 0, 0 is here. Okay, you'll notice that if I want to move the logo over to the edge to, I want to move this over to 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch. I want the top corner, and I select this. Here's another thing that's helpful. You'll notice that it's hard to gauge sometimes how to push a circle into a corner. I can also go to View, and I can say Show Bounding Box. And watch what happens when I select it. See how the little box is visible? Sometimes that's helpful, sometimes that gets in the way. But if I want to move this precisely into the corner so that it's a half an inch over and 1/2 inch down, the easiest way to do that is to click the upper left-hand corner here. And what it will do, whatever measurements I make here in the X, Y coordinates, it will use the upper left-hand corner as a guide. If I wanted to base my measurement or my movement based on the upper center, I would select this one, upper right, the center of my selection, and so on and so forth. You see how each of these corresponds to each of the little squares that you see here on the selection box? So if I select the upper left-hand corner, and I select that I want to move it over 0.5. Oops. And out. Let's do that again. 0.5. Notice it moved it right over to the edge, exactly on that mark. Similarly, I can go ahead and instead of -2 inches or whatever it is below the top part, I'll put 0.5 again, or 1/2 inch. And it actually moves up. That's not what I want. Something happened. If I move this down, it's minus, I'm sorry. This is minus 1/2 inch. Because you can measure on a plus side and a minus side. So I do minus 0.5. And hit the tab key and notice how it places it perfectly in the corner. So again, you can do it by hand and optically position elements. Yes. Right, it will drop to the bottom. So what I'm doing is I'm making sure that my ruler starts both at 0, 0 in the upper left-hand corner. So if you didn't change that, it won't match what I'm doing. Again, to do that, you move your cursor in the upper left-hand corner and this little square. Click and drag and move it over to the corner of the piece of paper and then release. And you'll see how both of these now will be 0, 0. Got that? No? So you're going to see the top part of the paper here. Okay. And click and drag here. And that change. Okay. So, for example, to change some of these things, in order to fit, for example, the stick surfboards in here, in order to resize this, sometimes it's easier to modify everything first. It's the way I would rather do it. I would rather, yes?
Mine's not showing the same thing that you're doing with that.
Yeah, mine is either.
Yeah. What is yours showing?
Mine just goes down.
Yeah.
Down.
Down.
What is,
The little circle thing?
The what?
The
You know
little
how it's
circle thing?
0.5?
Yeah.
You know how it's supposed to be like that, but mine.
Minus.
Yeah, and then it just goes down.
Did you put 0.5 and minus 0.5?
Yeah, and it went down.
And did you change where your 0, 0 is? You have to do that. You have to make sure that the 0, 0 is in the upper left-hand corner. Now again, I'm showing you things to do that the book doesn't necessarily show you. So I'm going sort of out of order. I'm going in the order of the book, but not quite the same. Does that make sense? Sort of. Notice how I can resize this quite easily by grabbing, when I have the bounding box visible, the selection box, I can click on the corner and drag to resize this and to reshape it. So what I'm going to do is size the logo. I'm going to put all the elements together first. Notice what we have here for a logo. We have stick surfboards, and we have these two surfboards. Right? And instead of a circle, because that's what they start with, we're going to switch to an ellipse. And for me right now, rather than follow the book precisely, I'm trying to make this look close to it, not quite the same. So now I'm going to move the surfboard in place. And before I do, I think what I'm going to do, because you'll notice that we have two of them, don't we? And they're really almost identical to one another, but they're not quite. One is the mirror image of the other, isn't it? Okay, so let's first rotate it. So by selecting it, and it depends on what you have selected. There's a couple of ways that we can do this. If I want to rotate this precisely about the center, let's say I wanted to rotate this 30 degrees, I could use my transform panel. I could type 30, and notice how it rotates it 30 degrees. With the bounding box visible, or the selection box, if I move over any corner, notice how the icon changes. I see a little curve with an arrow on either end. When I move over, like so, sometimes it's a little tricky to get it, and I click and I drag, and notice that I can rotate it that way. And I can spin it all around, like so. Okay, so I'm going to rotate it like so. There's a third way we can rotate it, yes.
How do you duplicate then? Like,
I'll show you in a second. There's a couple of ways that we can duplicate it. But I'm setting my first one up, and then I want one that's a mirror image, and then I'll resize it. The other way, another way that we could rotate it is that we could use the rotate tool, and the rotate tool could be done a couple of ways too. If I double click, notice that it brings up a dialog box, and I can put in, just as I could with the transform tool, a precise rotation angle, and then I could just click OK, or I could select copy if I wanted to make another one. That would be another way to do it. Another way to use the rotation tool, you'll notice the little blue crosshair where my mouse is. That determines the pivot point, or the point of rotation. It's a two-step process. If I click here first, and then I move outside, and I move the mouse, notice that I can move it, and I can control the angle of rotation. The closer to the object, the squirrelier it gets, the farther away you move the mouse. It functions like a fulcrum, the more control you have over the rotation. So those are all the different ways that you can rotate. It depends. Are you just doing it by eye, or do you want something really precise? Does it have to be 35.756 degrees or something? You know, it really depends on what you're doing. It looks just fine from here. Well, what I want to do now is make the board to the right, and because I already have one and I only need a mirror image, then I'm going to use something called the reflect tool, or mirror tool, or whatever you want to call it, this one here. Now, to do that, I'm going, and again, I sort of apologize that I'm not going directly by the book. I'm showing you how I would do it. And I think you should be familiar enough with the tools and we're done that, yeah, the book is a guide, but when all is said and done, you could go back and do the exercises like I am without looking at the book. And you may not do it exactly like the book, but that's okay. The book was only showing you, this is a tool, these are all the different ways you can use the tool. So what I'm going to do with this is I want it to pivot, or I want it to flip about maybe right here. If I hold down the Option key and I click, it brings up the little dialog box, and I can flip it across the horizontal, and I can click Preview. Notice that it turned the surfboard upside down. That's not what I want. I'm going to select vertical instead. And notice that it does. It makes a mirror image of it based on that point. That's the flipping point, the pivot point. Now, if I click OK, all it will do is it will take that object and it will make a mirror image of it. I don't want to do that. I want to also make a copy of it at the same time. So now what I can do is click Copy and notice that I have a duplicate. Now, this is probably not quite as elegant as the book, but what I can do is now I can move over the corner, hold down the Shift key to constrain the proportions, and I can drag it a little bit to resize it. Like the rotate, I can resize any number of these modification tools. I can do it precisely, I can do it in a general sort of way. There are probably 3 or 4 different ways of doing it.
Can you do that again? Duplicate.
To resize it or to flip it?
No, duplicate.
Okay.
With a new one.
To duplicate it, to simply duplicate it, all I have to do is hold down the Option key, click and drag, and release the mouse, and I'll make a copy. That's one way of doing it. But I don't want to just duplicate it. I want to duplicate it, and I want to flip it and make a mirror image of it. So to do that, I select the reflection tool, which is hidden underneath the rotation tool. I want to flip it about the vertical axis. So I hold down the Option or Alt key, and I click wherever I want that pivot point to be, and I click. And it brings up the dialog box. I want it to flip about the vertical axis. You can see by clicking on and off Preview what it's going to look like. Instead of clicking OK, I want to click Copy. Now it does make a copy of it. Now all I have to do is select Pre-Transform tool, or if I have my bounding box visible, move over the corner, try to move over the corner here, hold down the Shift key, and constrain the proportions. If you don't hold down the Shift key, look what happens. See how it can get really distorted? And if that's what you want, that's okay. But if you just want a bigger or smaller version of what you have, you want to constrain the relationship between X and Y. So to do that, you hold down the Shift key. Now, for my tastes, when I have elements in a design that I want to keep intact relative to one another, I want the placement of these two and the size of the relationship of these two to remain the same. So what I will do is I'll select both of them, and notice that they look like they're a single unit, but for them to remain a single unit, I'm going to group them together. To do that, you go to Object, Group, or remember G for Group and hit Command G. And now when I deselect, even when I select one, notice that they are both selected. If I resize one, they are both resized. If I move one, they both move. Now I can simply move this over into place. Notice it's a little too big, that's okay. If I want to resize, now, anybody know how I did that? How can I use the free transform tool, and how can I resize it from the center out? Remember how we made the objects the other day from the center out? Hit the option key. When you select it, if I want this to resize from here, from the center, pull down the option and constrain the proportions as well. Also hold down the shift key, and then when you move it, it will resize from the center and it will maintain its proportions. Now what I want to do is that I want the entire logo to function as a unit. So now I'll select the whole logo, including the type, and I will hit Command G again, and now I'm grouping my group to another group, turning it into another group. Now I can move this in place like so. I can do it by hand. I can, use the transform tool. Now to resize this, I move over the corner, hold down the shift key, and make it a little bit smaller. So. Okay. I could use the transform. If I wanted a specific width and height, I can also do that. Because they've already given me the blue guidelines, I'm just using those. Okay, the next step that we want to do is, you'll notice in the lower right-hand corner of the finished version, we want us to make a little flower. See these guys? This is sort of a fun thing. You get to see some of the nifty features. Yes.
Why is it that the lights up underneath?
Highlights in blue. I have something called view. It's smart guides turned on. Sometimes smart guides are smart and they help, and sometimes they get in the way. But that's where they're located under view. So that even without selecting, you can see the object highlights. And that will become especially helpful when we switch to gradient mesh tool and we want to apply color to gradient points, or points that will become a gradient from there and not have to select them. So, how to make a flower. And this is something that I would have never guessed how to do. But they do have some nifty tools. So what I'm going to do, believe it or not, is I'm going to start with, under the basic shape, a star. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a default black stroke, white fill. Actually, it's a white fill, no stroke here. So let me change that. Let me go back to the default white fill, black stroke. Okay, in order for this to look like a flower, what we can do is we can go to Object, and we can go to, hold on, now I'm going to seem stupid here. Oh, shit. I'm sorry, it's under Filter. And it's going to be under Distort. It's going to be Pepper and Blow. You may want to tinker with a number of those tools, but again, they're just ways of modifying something that you want to change. Who would ever think that I could take a star and I could do this, or I could do this? Pretty wild, huh? It takes those anchor points and it moves them in a mathematical way. There is a mathematical formula that describes that. Can I tell you that? No. But somebody figured that out, and when you use the little slider here, look at how it makes a really nifty kind of almost starburst kind of effect, and you move it this way and it pulls the points in. It pulls the points out, pulls the points in. Pretty cool, huh? Now, before I did that, I probably should have made a copy of this because I'm going to make the back one as well. So let me make a copy of this and set it aside. Select this one and go back to filter, distort, pucker and bloat. Oops, I'll turn on preview. There we go. So it bloats a little bit. That looks about right. So I have my petals.
Just make a copy of the one you've already done.
Huh?
Can you just make a copy of it?
I could, but I don't want, because this is the one I want to make here. Oops. Okay, they're grouped. So I need to use the group selection tool, which is important. The one that I want to make is this one. So I'm going to make that one as well. So let's take this one now. And I'm going to put a filter again. And I'm going to select distort, and I'm going to select twist. And let's put in 30 degrees, just for the heck of it, and see what we get. See how it takes from the center and it twists it. Filter, stylize, what did I say? Distort, twist. We do 30 again. Notice how it twists that even more. When it says twist, it takes the outer points and moves them, and it leaves the inner points fixed. So it's literally twisting something, distorting. I'm not explaining that very well. Do you get the sense of what's going on with it? Yes?
Aren't there also tools on the side here that we can use?
We can.
Do the same thing?
We can do the same
It's
thing.
not,
Huh?
it's not as precise.
No, for every one of these tools I'm showing you, good point, there are several ways usually you can do it. So if I were to, let's go back and let's make another star tool. And I have to remember myself that it's probably under here. And I pull this one on. Right. You notice that we have a whole bunch of these in here. Warp tool. We have the twirl tool, the pucker tool, which I could have used for this. We also have the bloat tool, which is just the opposite of that, but it's not as precise. The scallop tool, the crystallize tool, and the wrinkle tool. They all do some pretty funky things. I can click here. Wait a minute, that's not what I wanted to do. I want to use this one. Oops, I want to do that. I select these outer points. Now, I'm not sure what the book says, so let's take, and I'm going to these, I'm going to select the outer points. Hold down the shift key. And now I select the twist with the twirl tool. And it's not going to where I want it. Okay. Could you get it to work with one of these?
Twisting, to get it to look exactly the same as that, it's like really hard.
Yeah. So,
It's been real fast or,
for a real, okay.
yeah.
So, my intuition was correct then. When I said to use the filter tool up here, instead of using these hand tools here, I had a little bit more precise control over it. Now, they provided for us a gradient. So I can go ahead and select the gradient. And I can move this behind. And I can object arrange, send it back. So it's behind. Now I just need to make a little ellipse and fill it with yellow, and I have my flower. We started with a basic shape. We started with a star, and we used pucker and bloat, and we used twist in order to get something pretty unique. Something that you wouldn't, especially the one with pucker and bloat, who would think that you could get little petals out of a star? So I think in many respects, that's how the exercises help, is to point things out to you to see sometimes, well, this is a way I would have never thought to use this tool. And the more, books you look at, the more samples you see of people doing this sort of thing, it's surprising, what you can get. Pretty nifty. Go back to the circle here, the ellipse. I want to create it from the center out, and I want perfect circle, I want an ellipse. Like so, I'm going to pick yellow fill, and if I want to rotate it, let's go back to view and show bounding box. It says hi. So let's go back and select here. Let's move over the corner and rotate it slightly. And if I need to resize it, I can to get to the size that we see in the illustration here. Now, because I see these as a group, this is a flower. And you see the petals, and you see, what is the little yellow part called? In the botanist, that's where the pollen is. And we have sort of the petals, or the leaves behind here. But I see this as a unit. So what I like to do is I like to get in the habit of selecting those elements in the unit and grouping them together. So if I wish to make duplicates of those, as they've done here, I can very easily, without accidentally moving one part and not another, resizing one part and not another, that sort of thing. So I hit Command G to group, move it in place, resize it, Shift Option. That's pretty good to make a copy of it. Hold down the Option key, click and drag, release the mouse, and I have a duplicate. That's the easiest way to make a duplicate. If I turn on the address, and they may not say this in the book, but what you can see when you have layers visible is that some of them are turned on, some of them are turned off. You can always turn on and off the visibility in layers by checking on and off these little eye icons. They will print unless you specify otherwise, even when it's turned off. Now they also have, here too, when we made the little flip flops. That's okay, because I'm going to show some other things anyway. But to demonstrate an example of how I can use this logo on other elements quite easily without having to cut and paste and that sort of thing, is just simply select it in one file and drag it onto another file and release, and it automatically makes a copy of it. That's it. Don't have to do anything more to it than that. Then move it in place. And again, I can use the transform palette, or I can at least nudge it in the upper corner there using my guidelines. Pull down the Shift key and move it in place until it fits. So I can resize it so it's appropriate size for my envelope, but it's the same logo. You don't have to create it again. Now, if I wish to use the letters stick as they've done in the final version out here, this in a way gets a little tricky. Because I've made a group of this, anytime I use the selection tool, the whole thing is selected. I don't want that. So that means, so that I don't mess the logo up, I use something called the direct selection tool, which is hidden, or the group selection tool, which is hidden under the direct selection tool here. And now I can come in here, and notice that because they use create outlines, I can pull down the Shift key and click and select each one of these letter forms. This is not editable text. Now, I only want to make a copy of this, nothing else. So now I click the drag to begin to move it, and I hold down the Option key as I drag it to make a copy. It looks like I've moved. So let me make a copy of it. I can also, another way to do this is to hit Command C for copy, deselect, and you can also go edit, paste in front, paste, and notice that the key commands, the keyboard equivalents for paste are Command V or Apple V. Paste in front is Command F. Paste in back is Command V. So I'll paste in front. Notice it makes a copy of it, and I move it over. Now I can come back to my scale tool or my free transform tool. Select this, if I want to allow me to select it. Okay, what's going on? Here's the logo. It's not locked. Maybe because I have it, I may have it on the wrong layer. Let me take this again. What I'm going to do, pay attention to what I'm doing here. I'm going to do this a little bit different. I'm going to create a new layer just to keep it separate from everything else. So, and I go to my layers panel, and when I have my logo layer selected, I'll click on this little button right here, which is create new layer. And this will be separate for this unit. Now when I paste, you'll notice that it's outlined in a different color. Now this is separate from all of these other elements. I've isolated it by putting it on a separate layer. I can use the free transform tool again, move over the corner. Hold down the Shift key, and I can make this nice and big. Now, to skew this, or to get it distorted, there are any number of tools that we have at our disposal. The way I would like to do it is to make sure that the transform tool is selected. And this is where this gets a little counterintuitive. What you have to do is that if I want to simply distort, I click one of these 6, or regular 9, 6, 8 points around the corner. If I simply want to distort, I click on this one, pull down the Command key, and watch what I can do. So now it pulls and stretches just that corner and nothing else. That's pretty cool. I can also skew it from here as well. So again, if I click on a corner and I hold down the Option Command key, now notice how it skews it. And it almost looks like it puts it in a perspective. That's pretty cool too. And then the last one that we can do is we have something called a perspective. And again, you pick a corner, you hold down the Shift Option command, now watch. It's a one-point perspective. Depending on which corner I have selected, will be the one that actually begins to resize. Now I can change this. I'm going to make a yellow. I don't want it that bold. I want a tint of this. So instead, I'm going to use the transparency. If I don't see this in my palette here, it's hidden here while it's selected. Opacity right now is set to 100%. I can click and I can dial this back and notice it creates a nice little tint of it. So now it sits back, it's not so bold. If I need to further resize this or change it, I can move it twice. And now we have that. Yes. To warp them? Yeah. Let me undo a couple of steps. Bring it back. Okay. In order to warp them, you need the free transform tool. You're going to do this by hand. You need the object selected. that you're going to distort or to warp. Depending on which keys you hold down will determine what it's going to do. You first have to select the corner. If I click this one now, and I hold down the Command key, notice that I can move that single point wherever I want, and it distorts based on the movement of that single point. If I click and hold down that corner and hold down the Option command, now it turns it into the skew tool. And when I'm done, it sort of looks like it's in perspective, doesn't it? It looks like it's lying down flat on the ground.
How's it? Which tool? Which
Option command. And the last one is the perspective tool, and it's a one-point perspective. And again, it depends on which corner you select, and it depends on which way you move the mouse. If I click on this corner and hold down the Shift Option command, and watch when I move this way, we get that kind of Star Wars George Lucas effect. You know, and it looks like it's going back in space, and you can see the credits to the first Star Wars. But if I were to undo that and do that again, if I click here, Shift Option command, and I move it this way, notice how it's converging to a point over here now, as opposed to back here. It depends on which corner you select and which way you move the mouse. You might have other copies of it in the background. And okay, maybe by me putting it on a separate layer, what it did is it took it out of that group. It might still be part of the group. Why it's affecting that way. Okay, then probably copying it and pasting it on a new layer takes it out of that group. Let's see how many times I can do that. So let me distort it. Move it in place, change the fill color, change the opacity or transparency, however you want to look at it. 49. The last thing that it has us do in this exercise is you notice that we have one calling card created. And we want to create multiples because when you take your calling card or you take a number of items to the printer, they don't print just one card at a time. They print multiples, don't they? So what I'm going to do is select these and again make a group. Command G. To make a copy of the group, what key do I hold down as I move it? Option key. And to make sure that it moves absolutely perfectly horizontal, what other key do I have to hold down? Shift key. And that, just like it's on rails, it slides to the right. I move it on top of my guides, and I release. So now I have a duplicate, yes.
And right now that you have such a big group like that, you can still use the group selection tool.
Yes,
Wonder
and you can still select individual elements within the group. Now, to make things a little easier for me, and it's be useful to watch while I'm doing this, now I'll select both of these. And I'll click and drag and hold down the Option key and the Shift key to make a copy of both of these. Move it into place. Release. Now, to repeat that same copy. I copied both of those and moved it down. To repeat that again, you use something called duplicate. And to do that, you hold down Command and hit D, Command D. And that's how you make the rest. Now, let me show you some things that the book does, some ways, different ways of using duplicate, of taking advantage of some of these tools that allow us to transform existing objects to create something more complex. So we'll create a brand new file, and you guys just walk, you don't have to follow along with this, it's not part of the exercise. Have you ever has there ever been a time when you've wanted to take a number of elements and place them equidistant to one another around a circle? And you have to measure, you get out your protractor, and then you say, okay, I've got to measure 15 degrees or 30 degrees, and that sort of thing, and make it work. Well, let's do it this way. I'm going to make a little dot here, so a little black dot. So, and that's all I needed for one. Now what I need to do is I'm going to select the rotate tool right here. And I need to decide where I want my pivot point to be. So I'll move down, and for this demonstration, it's arbitrary. If you wanted it precise place, you probably would have to make some measurements. So to make duplicates of what I'm going to do, I want to pivot this and rotate it. And as I do that, I want to duplicate. So what I'll do is I'll hold down the Option key and I'll click with the rotate tool in place. I'll select 30 degrees. And I want to preview, and you can see, based on my pivot point and selecting 30 degrees, it's going to make a copy, it's going to move it in just that position that we're looking at right now. Instead of clicking OK, like we've done before, I'm going to select copy. Now, to repeat that, all I have to do is hit Command D. Oh.
Wait, what? Command what?
Command D. D for duplicate. Pretty cool, huh? So if you're thinking sometimes about these tools, and this looks pretty nifty because I've done it before, so it's not, for me, it's not a big deal, but when you're developing an illustration or a design or something, it's trying to think creatively about how you use these tools. Another example. Huh?
So what is it that is duplicating the?
It took the last one that I did, which was to make a copy and to rotate 30 degrees. So by hitting Command D, it takes that last step, which it sees as one, and it keeps rotating. It makes a copy. It rotates 30 degrees and copies. Rotates 30 degrees and copies. Now, how did I know to pick 30 degrees? Because I knew that, there's 360 degrees in a circle, and 30 is divisible into that. So, it looked about right. You could use few or more. But anything that will divide equally into 360. Another example, what if you want to make a picket fence, or you want to make a row of columns, or things like that? So if I start by using the rectangular tool, and I'll click and drag, and this is one picket in our picket fence. I'm going to flip this as a round white picket fence. And I want it to be pointy at the top. So now what I'll do is I'll go to my pen tool, and I'm going to select Add Anchor Point. I'm going to click right here, add one. And while that point is selected, I'll use my arrow tool, and I'll move it up. And I'm going to have a little picket, right? There's one picket in my picket fence. How do you make the whole fence? I mean, do you measure it? It really isn't necessary. You click and you drag and you hold down the Shift key and the Alt key. I'm holding down the Alt key to make the copy. I'm holding down the Shift key to constrain the movement so that it's perfectly horizontal. And I release the mouse. If I'm happy with the distance between those two pickets and my picket fence, now I hit Command D and I make a whole slew of them. Now what I want to do is I want to make a shadow for all of these. And I want the shadow to be based on the pickets that I have here. So let's select all of these and turn it into a group. Command G. Now let's use the skew tool. I can do this a couple of ways. I can take the existing one and copy it and skew it. Let's go back over here. It's not there. Where is it hidden? It's not there. They call it the skew tool. That's the one going out. What I can do is I can, if I want to work off of a duplicate, I can. I can also, depending on what time of day this is, does that make sense? I mean, is the sun behind the fence, or is it behind us looking at the fence? You know, it depends on what you want to do. So if I say that the sun is behind the fence and it's going to cast a shadow here, then maybe one of the things that I could do is take this and I could flip it, just as I did with the mirror tool before. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's select, I can't remember where it is, reflect. So let's select the reflect tool. And I want it to reflect from here. So hold down the Option key and I'll click. And this time I want it to be across the horizontal. And I copy it. So now I have those. Now I want it to fill with black. There's my shadow, but that would be if it was directly behind it. So what if I want to skew it a little bit? Then what I could do is we could select the skew tool. This is the one where I always get goofed up. I want to click from here. I'm going to Option click. And let's pick a particular angle here. A sheer angle. But maybe you want 45 degrees. Let's see preview. Nothing? What did I do wrong? Okay, it's canceled. So let me select all these again. Maybe that's part of my problem. Go ahead and just use the shear tool by itself then. Let's give this a try. Select the shear and click. And I'm going to drag. There we go. But that's not what I want. See what it's doing? That's where I get moved to. Okay. So let me click from this corner here. And now we move it. And I hold down the Shift key so that it constrains the movement. So where is the sun? You know, if it's to the left or if it's to the right. We anchor it based on where I click. And by moving it and holding down the Shift key, it constrains the movement. So now I have my shadow, and I can change the opacity of this if I want. If I want to send it behind, I can. That would work too. And flip it once again so that it would be behind it, so the sun is behind us. But it's using these tools in, I think, a smarter way by using Option sometimes or Alt-click to use specific angle and then make a copy of it. That's one way of doing it. Using the duplicate tool, that once you've done it once, hit Command D, and it will duplicate that task again and again and again. It can be used for any number of things. It was used to duplicate a calling card, the movement and the copy that we made there. It was also used to duplicate the pickets in the picket fence, to rotate. You can duplicate whatever you rotate, feature you created. So it can be pretty nice. There's a whole bunch of things that we can do with that. Okay, so those are the tools that we have. I'm going to go ahead in the modification tool. So do this exercise. If everybody gets done with it, I can move on to the pen tool a little bit later. I don't know that I'll record it because I'm going to record it this Thursday. You put it up. But I'm going to hit Shift Command 3, boom, end all of this, and I hope everything will be saved. And I'm going to cross my fingers, and then when it's up tonight, you'll be able to watch all of this if you want. In fact, if it works, and it should, you might have to adjust the sound and that sort of thing, because I'm not used to this.